any act done with selfless motive is always perfect. And in this book also, many times there are decisions the Prime Minister had to make which may not be very popular.
The notion that you have to win every time, the most dangerous lies are the lies we tell ourselves. I don't know why a leader has to win every time.
It's a journey, like I also write. Leadership is one continuous spiritual journey. It's sadhana in action.
If we don't take some risks, we will never get them done.
The personality of Sri Narendra Modi, in one word, it is Karma Yogi.
Namaskara to everyone in Bengaluru, and my very, very humble namaste to everybody. Thank you very, very much. It's been an air dash for me and it's been a very hectic day. But one of the things which I wanted to do, there are about 7 books, ladies and gentlemen. Of late, what's happened is, over the last 6-7 years, I've said I need to go back to reading. I used to read a lot, then I left it. It was all consuming via video, voice, etc. So no, I want to get back to the hardbound paperbacks, or the hardbacks. I want to get back to this. So now I have 7 books which I have not been able to read. And every day I look at it and said, oh, I got to finish this, I got to finish this, I got to finish this. And the more I read, somewhere one realizes the less I know. Because it opens up to saying there is so much more that we can learn and we can understand. The first thing that when I spoke with Balu sir, he had come to our studio and we had a short interaction. I don't know what he made of that interaction, but and I just got the book overnight. And I could read only about 2 chapters. I was very candid in that interview. It went on air also and Rajesh was telling me, you didn't read the full book. I said, dude, I didn't have time, but I read 2 chapters. And I read those 2 chapters and I said, the first 2 chapters is 10 books put together. The thought processes, the learnings, the insights from 10 books put together. So that's one more thing somebody very learned had told me, that if you can't read too much, sit and talk to people who are well read. So that's what we're going to do now. So first up, Sairam, and let me ask you, sir, this is something which he has spoken about very often. What is Karma Yoga? And who is a Karma Yogi? And Manish ji, I'll bring you in because of this term itself. So let's start from there.
Thank you for opening this on the very note with which I was trying to explain to the people about the personality of Sri Narendra Modi. In one word, it is Karma Yogi. And he's a part of the Karma Yogi mission too, Mr. Balu. So it's the most appropriate question, I think, for the evening. Karma Yoga, as you know, is made of 2 words. There is karma, which is action. It could be mindless action also. It could be selfish action also. It could be action only for one's own profiteering. Now the other side, or also it could be selfless action. And yoga is a state of existence where neither you are the doer nor the enjoyer. You simply instrument a divine will or a divine decree through you. And it happens through you. You are not the doer, you are not the enjoyer. Yet you are the instrument through which everything happens. So when you come together, all the actions that you perform from that state of existence, where you do not feel the doership nor the enjoyership, that is perfect Karma Yoga. And that is what Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, Nimitta matram bhava savya sachin. Just be an instrument. Don't worry about what will happen, what will be the consequences, and what will be the process of this war, how many will die, how many will survive. That's besides the point. Just be an instrument, and that's all I expect from you, he says. So Karma Yoga, to me, there are many definitions, and if you ask somebody, probably they'll quote the most quoted Karmanyeva Adhikaraste and things like that. But to me, Karma Yoga in a simple word is perfect instrumentation. So when you become perfect instrument of the divine, these questions of being selfish or selfless, being detached or attached, being anxious or being easy, all these don't exist. There's no confusion of all these dualities there because you're simply an instrument. Whatever happens through you is perfect. So even if it's Arjuna killing his own kith and kin, perfect. And even if it's somebody who is forgiving somebody like Buddha, perfect. So anything that happens with this feeling of instrumentation is perfect Karma Yoga. And to me, perfect action in this world, as yoga, karma su kaushalam, it says. The excellence in action is yoga. But for me, my definition of perfection is selflessness. Any act done with selfless motive is always perfect. Even if it apparently looks like a hard thing to do or it looks cruel in case of Mahabharata war, as we know. And in this book also, many times there are decisions the Prime Minister had to make which may not be very popular. It is not something that what he calls as, in somewhere he was mentioning about the sovereign individual and the surveillance of state.
Yeah.
And these individuals are unable to understand the philosophy, the vision of the Prime Minister at some times. They oppose, they criticize him, they even come up in arms against him and things like that. Yet he has made decisions. And those decisions are neither right nor wrong because they are simply Karma Yogas, they are perfect. When it's done from that state of instrumentation, to me that is Karma Yoga.
Lovely. I'm just going to stretch this thought thread a little with Manish ji because from not just team leads, but you're also doing a lot of advisory work and you worked with people and you're working in the zone of skilling. Now, how do you tell a person who's coming to you or coming to be part of the program so that he can take bread back home or do something in life? It's ambition that's fueling them. How do you tell them, hey, the program's name is Karma Yogi, so you've got to just do. Just believe in action.
I mean, let's not go from one extreme of, the Indic view of life is only learning and knowledge and sitting and thinking. The other extreme of view that the only thing in life is action, right? I think the point of being a Karma Yogi, in fact, let me step back. I think in the past, the Indic view of leadership had a naive relationship with power. It had a childish view of morality, and it probably had an incomplete view of action, right? You campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose, right? Thucydides, he's one of my favorite historians of war. He used to say, any army that has too much of a gap between its thinkers and doers will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. Right? So there is no contradiction between thinking and doing, only the childish belief that there is. In fact, in my mind, I think the point of being a Karma Yogi is the right balance of thinking and doing, right? I mean, we entrepreneurs write our business plans in poetry, but you execute them in prose, right? But too much poetry, you do nothing. Yeah. And too much prose, you do nothing great. Right? One of my favorite lines in the Bhagavad Gita roughly tells us that, what stands between us and our greatest goals are not obstacles. They are clearer paths to lesser goals. Right? So I think this goal setting, Karma Yogi is a balance of, thinking and doing, but it's also being reflective and thoughtful about which goals to pursue. I think, to me, the most interesting question about people's are what is your goal? That's, yeah. I mean, and most people, sort of answer the question about the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes. But I think being Karma Yogi is really about, Jonas Salks, he's the inventor of the polio vaccine. The last line in his biography says, our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors, right? I mean, most of us are not really thinking about what a good ancestor means. But I think a Karma Yogi is absolutely baked into that. It's about being a good ancestor, it's being balancing thinking and doing, and it's about picking the right goals.
Picking the right goals. You quote the Vyada Gita in the book. Padchiten, sir. Pulla padchiten. So you quote the Vyada Gita in the book, and that it's amazing. It's again from the Mahabharata, and the example of a monk who's actually told to go and look at people of common life. He meets a lady and then she points him to a butcher. And they're able to understand something which is so simple, which the monk after so much of tapas has not been able to understand. Just do your job and don't think too much about it. Just do your job. How easy or difficult is it to get to that stage?
I think it's a journey, like I also write. Leadership is one continuous spiritual journey. It's sadhana in action. It's a constant process of reminding yourself of a simple question Ramana asked, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing in this role? Not losing sight of the distinction between role and self. And if you stay focused on that distinction and say, in a role I have to operate the way I have to operate for that role. A role is always in context. Therefore, I say leadership is in context. And the butcher, in the context of his profession, is a butcher. But it doesn't take away the fact that he has a self and he goes deep into it. And one approach of reaching the self or tapping into the powers of the self is just staying focused on what you do and doing it well. Not because it has to be done well to please somebody or to get the results, like Swamiji said, the enjoyership of your action, but just doing it. Today, most of us are so transactional in our existence. What Veda Gita teaches us is the non-transactionality of leadership itself. But we have made every single action of our existence transactional. And if I were to, every time I talk to people, and especially when you go to Delhi, you live in an enormously compounded transactional ecosystem. For somebody like me who was living in a forest most of my life and where everything was binary, to operate in this transactional ecosystems where you don't even figure out who is transacting for what. I think for them Veda Gita is a necessity. And staying, not losing sight of we all are there to discover ourselves in the service of others. And I would draw that as the most powerful leadership message from. And coincidentally, what really got me to write about it is also the fact that when I was having a very extensive discussion with the Honourable Finance Minister and her journey of working as a minister in the cabinet of the Prime Minister, and she said, all that matters is, are you really focused on what we are supposed to be, not on the portfolio, not on just finance or defense or whatever she's handled, but on clearly not losing sight of all this is just for the nation. And that's it. And to me, then she narrated the Veda Gita and said, I keep reminding myself that I got to remember, I can't be the monk just because I'm a minister today, but I got to be that butcher who's staying focused on what I have to be focused on, and everything else will happen. And that's why I wrote it.
Many in corporate world believe the finance minister was quite the butcher with them for a while, wasn't she? But she had to do what she had to do and respect for that. Now, the other aspect from the Vedic, you draw the Vedic roots where you call the Prime Minister a sadhak. So Sadhguru, I'm going to ask you, so from Rita to Rina there is a journey, but what holds all of that is Dharma. So what is Dharma?
You're giving me questions that can be interpreted in 100 ways and all ways are right.
Correct.
So
Because there is another sub-layer to that. So where I'll bring in how Bhishma explains to Yudhishthira. So we'll come to the Rajdharma part after that. First Dharma.
Yeah, so Dharma, I think the very fundamental definition of Dharma is Dharayati iti Dharma. That which holds, that which protects, that which supports and sustains. That alone is Dharma. For example, fire's Dharma is to burn. If it cannot burn, it's no more fire. Or water's Dharma is to cool. And if it cannot cool, it is not water anymore. Likewise, everything and everyone in this universe has their own Dharma. It's called Swadharma or Atma Dharma, it's called. And everybody is bound to follow that Dharma. Only then there is harmony and perfect balance in the universe. When they deviate from their original nature, which is their Dharma, the original duty, which is their Dharma, this support, this sustenance of the universe falls apart. And what is the Dharma of, so in that way everybody has a Dharma of their own. A doctor has a Dharma, a teacher has a Dharma, a politician has his Dharma, somebody like Mr. Balu has also a Dharma, you have a Dharma, I have a Dharma. So also a tree, a dog, a bird, everybody has their own Dharma and they're bound by that, they follow their path. So karma follows Dharma for them. However, there is one Dharma which is universal for all of us. And that Dharma is, according to me, Paropakara. To live for the betterment, for the welfare, for the upliftment of others. That's a common Dharma to all. And our Subhashita says, Paropakarartham vahanti nadyaha, Paropakarartham phalanti vrikshaha. So everything is for the sake of doing good to others that we exist in this universe. Dharma of Arjuna, again if I have to borrow from our Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, was to fight the war. And he, being a Kshatriya who is supposed to uphold his Dharma of protecting the virtuous and punishing the evil, if he decides not to do it, it will create chaos in this society. And that's why Krishna pushes him and encourages him to follow his Dharma and tells Sadharma Nidanam Shreya. It's better you die doing your dharma than try to not do your dharma. It's not right on your part. So dharma is that basic fundamental quality, that nature, that very duty, responsibility that each one of us carries. And these dharmas can change. When you are with your wife, you have a pati dharma. When you are with your son, you have a pita dharma. So everybody has dharma. Rama had given this example of putra dharma, pati dharma, and raja dharma, and because of which he was what he was. And that is the idea of dharma, that which should be able to sustain and protect and ensure that the whole world goes on in harmony. That is the basic fundamental idea of dharma.
But Rama also, when he explains to Bharat, when Bharat comes to him and tells him, how do I rule? Tell me. Or even when Ravana tells Lakshman, and when Ram says, go and learn from him, they all put Rajdharma above everything else. So does Ram. My duty to my wife, my duty to my family is all superseded by my duty to my people as a king. Why does that happen? Why is it the Dharma says, so for all of us, what comes first? My duty to my country, or my Dharma to my country, or Dharma to my family, or Dharma to my company? What comes first?
I think there is a hierarchy there, and there is an algorithm also. And I think it's Vidura who very nicely conveys it.
Yeah.
In Vidura, he says, Tyajet ekam kulasyarthe, gramasyarthe kulam tyajet, gramam janapadasyarthe, atmarthe prithvim tyajet. You can sacrifice one person, Purusha, for the sake of grama, the community where you live. You can sacrifice the grama for the sake of greater society or the country that you live for. You can sacrifice the country, even the earth, for the sake of following the ultimate dharma, which I mentioned, Atma Dharma, which is for the universal welfare of all. And many people think Atmarthe means for your selfish sake, you can sacrifice anybody, but that's a very poorly translated version of the shloka. Atma Dharma is the true, as I said, the true dharma of Paropkara, to be of good to everyone. So when it comes to choosing which dharma supersedes which one, you have to apply this algorithm. That this should do greater good to more number of people in more ways. If that is happening, then the lesser good to less number of people in less ways can be sacrificed. And that is the hierarchy you must follow. And for a leader to make decisions, this shloka is a must. If they don't realize this shloka, they'll end up making decisions out of attachments, out of prejudices, out of preferences, and things like that. And that's where everything becomes chaotic.
You ever face this dharmic conflict, Manish ji? Or you had absolute clarity?
No, I'm an entrepreneur. Life is second best at best. we don't maximize. We optimize. We don't view life as a conflict. We view it as trade-offs. So I don't think it's as it requires you to make that absolute choices to decide between whether you want to have a family or you want to build a great company or you want to do that. I mean, you can position it as that, but I think life is more fun when you view it as trade-offs rather than as in conflicts.
But were you, I won't say conflict, but were you forced to make a choice where the head and heart didn't actually align? So what needs to be done and what you thought was right?
Oh, I mean, of course, I think life is second best at best.
So then how do you deal with it? And I'm asking you as a leader, as an entrepreneur, because there are so many in the gathering too. How do you deal with it? And how do you make the choice?
I mean, I think you first have to answer the question whether you're the waiter or the chef, right? I mean, are you a motorboat or are you river rafting? I think the Carlyle sort of view of leadership that, people make history or history make people is a fundamental question which I think half the world think that, you're just the waiter and half the world thinks that you're the chef. But I don't think you can be an entrepreneur unless you believe you're the chef. I mean, though we're not always the chef. One of my favorite courses at business school my professor used to teach was Stupid Entrepreneurs and Wise Society. He says, society only needs one entrepreneur to succeed, but we need 10 to believe that they will succeed and they will be the one. So I think the question that you're posing me is probably better answered by them.
No,
Because we entrepreneurs have to be delusional about our ability to succeed. We have to be delusional. It is the will to believe almost. There was I think it's a mask of command in some sense, even though we're not always sure of what we're doing. So I think that, of course, there are conflicts, but I think in a sort of place where you recognize that life is second best at best, but that is not a compromise. That is just, the idea is not perfection, it's progress in my world. But progress is a pretty good consolation prize.
Yeah, because as leaders, every time when you make a decision which you think needs to be taken, which needs to be made, you're driving back home or you're sitting back and then you're wondering, did I really do the right thing? Because we all live with our choices. We've got to live with those choices. At that time, you don't know if it's right. It'll all manifest later. I'm asking you, Balu sir, you brought up the formulas. Just now, Sadhguru said that you've got to do what is it for the greater good, right? So the greater good was for the 27 and a half states and union territories whose farmers were not out on the streets. There were 1.5 states. So in this case, did he actually take the right decision? As a leader, would you say the Prime Minister perhaps faltered here? This is my chance to provoke.
I understand, to put me in trouble too. But let me answer it as honestly as I can. I think what you see is what you see. And what you see is just the farmers on the street. I think the decision gets taken because at the position that you are sitting on the pyramid, you get a lot of visibility of information that possibly you and I on the street don't get. So the decision was taken not just to pull back the farm laws. It was taken keeping a lot of, I write in the book also, keeping the sovereignty of the country, keeping the external forces that were trying to take up, and then the distraction that it was causing. So there's a price to be paid by going ahead of the farm laws, which is a higher price to be paid as a nation, which I can't break down further than what I'm saying right now. So it was definitively exactly what had to be done. And if it had not been done, the consequences and the price that this country would have paid was far higher than we could have imagined. And that nearly happened just before the elections again.
Yeah.
And that had to be aborted. And so you have to titrate constantly with the data that flows into a decision maker. And the necessity and the pressure of having to take the decision in real time. It's always very easy to postmortem. But in real time, and knowing fully well the data could be inconsistent, incomplete, inadequate, but still making an informed choice, keeping the larger good, was what happened.
But then would you admit, you talk about the diffusion theory, Man Ki Baat and top down. But in this case, should it have been bottom up? Hindsight affords us luxuries, but something which was revolutionary, something which was 2.5 decades in coming, something that the nation's Kisans would have benefited from, should it have come bottom up rather than going top down?
This is a question I can answer very confidently. It's a personal view, and I'm not saying what, obviously I'm not there to advise the Prime Minister on these issues. So my view is, if you look
purely
at,
from a leadership aspect.
And I have explained this in the Kashmir issue. Everybody sees Article 370 as a momentary announcement which all happened and fell in place. What people failed to see was a 30-year personal engagement of the Honourable PM in this entire process, ripening the issue quietly, bringing it to the stage where the perspectives of everybody was addressed and the stakeholding was assessed, and then action was taken. I think if that process had been followed in the farm laws, we would have succeeded.
So you and me are on the same page there, that if you could do it with the decision on the Ram Janmabhoomi, if you could do it with 370, could it have been done?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could I help?
Yes, Manish. Yeah, please.
Because I come back to optimization. I don't know why a leader has to win every time. If we're right 60% or the 66% of the time, we're doing a damn good job. This notion of, my favorite Hindi poet is Ramdhari Singh Dinkar. He says, Shama shobhati us bhujang ko jiske paas garal ho. Only the powerful can be kind, benevolent, and generous. The weak cannot be kind, powerful, benevolent, and generous. So I think in the process of making India sort of strong, which as a government, as companies, as individuals, I would say that the notion that you have to win every time, the most dangerous lies are the lies we tell ourselves, right? So let's be careful with saying that we have to win every time, or when you back down from a decision, you're making a mistake. Our mistakes never kill us.
No. That is huge courage to come out and say it was ill time. We did not do it right. I couldn't convince anybody. That shows courage of a leader. And hats off to the Prime Minister for doing it. Nobody else could have done it the way he did it. That's not what I'm saying. When you have a template of leadership, of execution, which is already there with you, which you have practiced, and it's worked on far more contentious issues, then could this have been a learning, is what I'm saying. As a leader, could this have been a learning? That
I would say, I've worked with government a lot in the last 20 years. One of my biggest questions in government is, how do you get something done when everybody who matters in government agrees with you? Right?
Correct.
And the problem is that anybody can say no and nobody can say yes. So there come times when you take a risk, which that may not work out, or you believe is right, because if anybody can say no and nobody can say yes, you essentially won't get anything done in a democracy. I mean, of course, at some point you'll have to optimize, you'll have to take some risks, you'll have to back down. So I would submit, even, postmortems have a certainty that prescriptions don't. Every doctor knows that. but in addition to that, there are 3 or 4 big issues in India. If we don't take some risks, we will never get them done, because there is a vested interest and nobody cuts the tree they're sitting on.
Okay. Fair point made. How do I know, Sadhguru, that my Viveka or Prajna is being corrupted by Maya? How do I know? What's the test?
The first test is that you know that you have Viveka in the first place. Most of them think they have, but they don't have one. And they are driven by, as I said, their prejudices or influences. So, see, Viveka is a very unattached, very balanced view of things. Right? Yeah. When you understand right from wrong as clear as daylight, there is no confusion in your head that this is right or this is wrong. And so that Viveka is an ability to discriminate and discern the right action from the not so right action. And that is not given to all. But once you have Viveka, it comes with its cousin called Vairagya. Yeah. Without Vairagya, Viveka cannot stand or hold water. Because Vairagya is the only ability that a person, a Viveki, should have to execute that Viveka. If he is not detached from both the decision and the consequences, which is actually Vairagya or detachment.
Exactly what Krishna tells Arjuna.
Absolutely. Without that Vairagya, Viveka is of no use. Now, I'll go back to your farm law question.
Yes.
Can I give my 2 cents of perspective? See, Viveka said.
See, everybody is getting interested. That means I'm doing a good job. Please.
Now, see, the question is that the king, they say, Yatha Raja Tatha Praja. That is the old adage. As is the king, so are the people, so are the subjects. In our country, it's not so. Because we are a democracy, we are not absolutely dedicated to the king as he being the supreme authority and his word being final. Everybody has their opinions, perspectives, and things like that. Everybody is free to express that and also make it known that they're happy or not happy with whatever is being decided. So the problem is that when those people who thought that these laws are right did not get up and stand for it, that's where the law failed. Prime Minister failed or the policymakers failed. That's a very limited way of looking at it. The whole country failed because
those who felt the laws were right didn't stand up.
Didn't stand up for the right. In fact, one day, one of the monks, Atmapriyanandaji, had come to the ashram. He was speaking on some youth conference and he said, bad people are bad because they are so convinced that they are not bad. And good people are not good because they are not sure whether they are good.
Whether they're good. So well said.
So they don't have the courage to stand for goodness because they're not sure whether they're really good. The bad people are super convinced that they are not at all bad. So they can stand up and fight for whatever. So they have Viveka, good people, but they don't have Vairagya, which means to stake it all for the sake of executing that decision that you want to make. So a country is only a sum total of all its people, isn't it? One prime minister is not the country. Everybody, when they think, feel and work, in alignment, that's when country progresses. Otherwise, this is such a huge country with so many moving parts. So we have a lot of people in our country who seem to have Viveka, but they do not have the Vairagya. So without Vairagya, Viveka is of no use, is the straight thing. And the other thing that you're saying, how do I know that my Viveka is selfless or not selfless?
Corrupted by Maya or not?
Corrupted by Maya, because I might be prejudiced in my opinion. I think this is what is right. Somebody says a temple is right, somebody says something else is right. And everybody is convinced about it in some way. But we do not know whether this conviction is coming from real wisdom or from fake narratives or wrong understanding, misunderstanding. See, every time your Viveka is correct, it's selfless. There is no contamination of fear, anxiety, or any such negative emotions in your Viveka. That is the only test which tells you that what you have decided is right. And there is no, it's not contaminated by Maya, because there is no confusion in your head and no fear. Because Vairagya is following that Viveka in its footsteps. So when Vairagya is there with Viveka, you know there is no Maya in it. But when Vairagya is not there with Viveka and you are having some doubts, self-doubts, then you know that Viveka is not clear and probably you need to do some more thinking before you plunge it. So I think to develop a country which can execute its Viveka, which can action its Viveka, we must develop a country which knows what is Vairagya. To be detached from the consequences of the action. And in this particular case, I think I have to give it to the leader of the nation. You see, Rama also, you go to Ramayana, it's full of such issues where Rama wanted to do one thing, but there are other forces that were at work and he had to sometimes kind of, withdraw from doing what he wanted to do because of whatever greater things. I think one side of it is, of course, Rajadharma at that point of time wanted or needed or mandated that such a decision should be withdrawn, which is fine. At an individual level, the equanimity of the leader, it's tested to its hilt because you have to, it's like a public apology you're making for having held the country, not say ransom, but in a state of paralysis.
Flux for
1 full year.
1 full year.
And that's a lot of pressure to handle. But I have to give it, your book has very, very nicely explained that samatva bhava, that equanimity, that sthita prajna of the leader, which is tested during those times. But where is this sthita prajna coming from? From the vairagya, which was alongside Viveka. So Prime Minister Viveka told him that these laws are good for the country with the help of whatever counsels he had. He also had the vairagya to withdraw it even if it was not working. See, that is leadership. Without Viveka, vairagya is like one is lame and one is blind. They have to come together to continue journey. So this is where I think we have to appreciate the skill, the Viveka and Vairagya, both of the Prime Minister, as well as such leaders who had to sometimes swallow their own decisions and yet not be, depressed or get into a state of what you call inaction. They come up with the next thing and they continue the journey.
Brilliant. 60 crore farmers who really were for this had a sense of Vairagya and stood up for it. It would have been a different story altogether. But then you have to be detached enough to say somewhere around the ball will come, the curve will come. But many believe that for the next 20-25 years, no leader will have the gumption to go ahead and push for those agri reforms, which is such an important step for all of us as leaders. But then, Balu sir, let me also ask you this. The Prime Minister, have you ever seen him lose his equanimity or equipoise? There is a lot that you have not put in the book, so.
You read the book, and what I put is what I have seen. His equipoise is absolutely, you can't really believe it. And for those, if I were to give a recent example, there's a lot of noise about not touching 400. There's a lot of noise about falling to 240. But did it make a difference on him? At least for those of us who are observing very closely, absolutely no. And that is example enough for people to understand the numbers don't matter, but the opportunity to serve continues mattered. And absolutely. So I don't think I've seen that state. A lot of people I've interviewed who worked very closely with him for a very long period of time. They've never seen him angry. They've never seen him humiliate anybody. And I can say from our own personal experiences, when presentations are made to him, and in the launch of Delhi, Amitabh Kant also sharing that, I've written about it in the book also. Some of the presentations so pedantic, you wonder why this is man presenting to the Prime Minister of the country. And he would never feel, I would feel agitated, or he would never feel agitated, absorb it, pay the same 100% of his time to that presentation, ask a lot of questions. The questions themselves would tell the presenter that he's not done his homework. Right? And I think that state, to see in a leader of that stature, is something that one has to actually experience firsthand and not believe in what we read in all this stuff that we get today. Sometimes I think social media seems to be more real than the real, right? And we have to be careful. And we are all worried. Like, as a nation, I think fake is more real than real. And in that situation, to use the social media as effectively and as efficiently as the Prime Minister does, but not to get affected by it, itself is an example of equipoise.
True. I want to ask all of us, just a show of hands, how many of us have went to or made decisions in anger or out of ego? You can all put your hands up, nobody will be counted. So, how many of us have just decided, let's just get out, get onto a bus, get onto a train, and just go? How many of us are willing to allow our children, when they are 12, 13, 14, to go on their own? Or even now when they're 4, 5, 6, to go down to the shop, buy things and come back on their own? Do we as a nation have this quality of taking risks? Because if we have to get where we want to be, Manishji, we need a nation of risk takers. Are we culturally inclined to take risks?
See, cultural explanations for things are at best the soft bigotry of low
I'm saying
expectations.
sociologically also, as a country, as a people,
You know,
inclined to take risks.
one of the most idiotic economists was a guy at Delhi School of Economics who in the 1970s said, look, India grew between 1820 and 1950, India grew at 0.1%. And from 1950 to 1970, we grew at 2%. And he called it the Hindu rate of growth.
Rate of growth, yeah.
Yeah, but we've grown, well, I'll disagree with him later because I hate that expression. Because since 1991 till now, we have grown at 7% and we didn't shoot all the Hindus, right?
Yeah.
So clearly that was an incomplete or a bigoted explanation for our economic growth was not high because there was a license Raj. India was a reckless experiment. It was the 1955 Avadi resolution or the 1956 second five-year plan, which has kept us poor. So I would be very careful to believe that Indians are not risk takers. There is no cultural explanation for our risk taking. If you're talking about economically, then there's lots of risk takers when we are allowed to take risks. 50% of India's foreign direct investment since 1947 has come in the last 6 years. When we make ourselves worthy of capital, we will get the capital, right? So when we were not worthy of capital in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we didn't get it. So I would be very careful in believing that we are not a nation of risk takers. I mean, in my mind, it's sort of like, when I landed in the US in August 1994, there was a front page for my MBA. There was a front page article in the Wall Street Journal which said that India is more interesting than important. I hope that journalist is eating the newspaper on which he wrote that, right? Because what's happening in India is not once in a decade or once in a millennium. It's once in the lifetime of a country.
So Wall Street Journal was like that even then?
Yes. No, but in some sense, the questioning of whether India is risk-taking, whether India is more sustainable, is an unfair question. We had a lot of regulatory cholesterol. We kneecapped entrepreneurs. We kneecapped capital markets. We kneecapped banks. Where would we expect economic growth? Now that we are unleashing that economic growth, I think that, we missed our tryst with destiny, right? There are 200 million people in India who will never read the newspaper that they deliver or sit in the car that they clean or send their kids to the school that they help build. But we have made a new appointment with our tryst with destiny, which is combining mass prosperity with mass democracy. And I think that's an appointment we will keep in the next 25 years.
Well, let's hope that. Because to do that, the leader of the nation will have to make a very interesting choice along with all of us, which you talk about with Danny Roderick, the trifecta. Now, how do we choose? Who do we be? A democracy, a nation state, or part of the entire globalization maneuver? Because his logic is that you can choose only two. You can't go with all three.
No, I also might have written it to show that we have got a better way. That's the last chapter, right? The Dharma of legacy and the legacy of Dharma is this option where this balance that even Manish referred to, where you have to choose. You can't say a surveillance state is not real. Every single country in this world is a surveillance state, whatever people may argue. And you also, everybody talks about the sovereignty of the individual, and you also talk about the sovereignty of the state, but finding the right balance. And I try to bring the Purusharthas in there and talk about Dharma being the binder. You cannot dismiss of the need to acquire capital in a practical, realistic way. Now spirituality would be of no use to anybody, but if you don't have it in a practical way applied, I've tried to explain that in this book in a different, subtler way. To me, how you acquire that artha matters, the means matters, and that's where Dharma comes in. And in a consumption-driven economic system, if you're talking of the 4 Ps that we made in the Delhi Declaration, to make it practical, you must actually bring in the reference of life and those personal choices we make and converting karma to yoga and moving away to a compassionate capitalistic world. Capitalism is real, you can't run away from it, but getting the karuna back into that narrative. And that artha is what I'm trying to say. And then that alone is not enough. Without desire, artha is not going to happen at all, right? And in a very materialistic way I'm explaining, because that's the world. Now, transcending that and seeing what am I doing all this for, and looking at moksha from that perspective is not just about me, but the sentence I repeatedly use in the book, possibly the most I've used in the book, is Atmana Mokshartam Jagat Hitaya, just saying that my moksha has to be to Jagat Hita. And if that Jagat Hita to happen, the 4 Ps will fall in place. So I have tried to explore that mid path. It's not a binary saying this or that, but saying that how do you get it? And that's the Indic path. And that's what we've been talking about. And let me go back to your earlier question. I beg to completely disagree. We Indians are not risk-taking.
Okay.
Otherwise, India couldn't have achieved what it did for 1600 years, in whatever way, not just economic way, in a philosophical way, in a spiritual way, in the scientific way, everywhere. The freedom of thinking that was allowed us to result in so many things that we gave, whether the binary system to trigonometry to algebra.
Yes.
The last 200, 300 years, we have convinced ourselves we are idiots, and we are standing in front of a mirror, complaining that the mirror is not good. But I think what we have discovered in the last decade is there's just dust sitting on the mirror, and wipe that dust away, India will be where it rightfully belongs. Because Indians will put us there.
See, another
Could I just,
Yes,
on the
please.
trifecta?
Yes, please.
Right, I think Danny Roderick is wrong. Because we were the first, as a
I'm
democracy.
glad you said that.
Yes. If you talk about globalized, India exported more software than Saudi Arabia did oil in 2021. There is no country in the world with a per capita income of $2,500, which exports $250 billion of software and $50 billion of pharma and has 120. So we will be a globalized country. Democracy, we are the first country in the world to give universal franchise at birth. Most countries gave it to the rich, then they gave it to the landed, then they gave it to the educated. Some women in Switzerland got to vote in 1972. The difference in India and Pakistan born on the same night is 3 million people in India win an election. 21 million people stand for an election. So I think that democracy train has left the station. I think the globalization train has left the station. And I don't know what you mean by, are you going to be a nation state or not? We are a nation state. So therefore, India will be all three. And we will prioritize and optimize and make second best choices.
But when we come to as a nation state, do we all really identify ourselves as Bharatiya now? Have we really grasped this entire concept of me being a Bharatiya first or me being an Indian first? There's a reason why I'm asking you this, Sadhguru, because if you can take risks, then you'll create wealth, you'll create jobs, you will not be looking for a sarkari naukri and a secure position. And my idea will not be to go and work for someone. So, that's why I said, are we innately wanting somebody else to take the lead and we'll follow? Or are we ready to go out and take the lead? And are we ready to do it for our country? Are we driven so passionately for our country that we are ready to go and look at he has set a goal. Rather than saying Prime Minister Modi has set a Viksit Bharat goal of 2047, when is it going to come down, diffuse to a level where every person here says, listen, this is what I am doing for my country to be Viksit by 2047. Hey, not 2047. I want to be done by 2040 or 2035. When is it? When is that going to? Is every entrepreneur thinking in that direction, or are they thinking, all right, when can I make my next million? When can I make my next 10 million, 20 million, and then when can I get out of the country or sell it out? You see, there's a difference. Creating wealth for the nation or creating wealth for yourself and selling it off. Startups, half of them want to create a valuation so they can hive off. They're not saying, I'm not going to sell. I want to stay. I'm going to build wealth. I'm going to become a behemoth. So that's the thought process. How far are we from getting there?
So if you look at the history of India, I think we were all entrepreneurs. There were no government jobs for us to do. Our fathers were craftsmen, they were weavers, they were farmers, they were sculptors, they were, in a way, scientists, educationists. Everything was entrepreneurship in India. That is what is there in our genes. It's a different matter that during the colonial rule or after that, even in the early stages of our independence, seems like we have all been dumbed down to think that we can't do things for ourselves. We must depend on some other nation because that was the basis of colonial rule. It made us think that we were not good enough and we needed them. And that's when we will submit ourselves to somebody like them. But now things are changing. I'm not talking about the 80s, 70s to 90s brain drain and all that which India suffered with. Because even today when I travel abroad, I meet people who are graduates from our premier institutions. They're in tens of thousands in numbers. They're doing very well for themselves over there. But did they absorb this idea of Bharatiyata which you mentioned? And I'm not getting into the traditional definitions of Bharatiyata where the land of India has been defined in a certain way and the value system of India has been defined in a certain way. And the greatest definition that was of India was that we were all very spiritual. Bha-rata. Bha means that effulgence. Rata means those who revel in that. And that effulgence of that spiritual knowledge is what, or any kind of knowledge is what Bharata represented. So do we take pride in that? Do we feel for our country the way we are supposed to? Do we feel one in that idea of Bharatiyata? Now, these are questions that each one of us has to answer for himself or herself. But where the country is heading in general today, I think Prashant is there. They know better about entrepreneurship. But I do see the younger generation has decided to change the narrative and not go by the past rhetoric. I see a lot more commitment from the younger generation towards the country, its welfare. And the country also has changed. Opportunities have come. What he would tell us that the kind of policies that came in to create that kind of ecosystem where entrepreneurs can also take risk and take calculated risks and they also can be rewarded, that has been created. It wasn't the case probably 25, 30, 50 years ago. And that is where the opportunity is. And I think the young India is recognizing that. What is needed is the old India to change its ways. The young India is quite right and it's going in the right direction. I think as far as committing to the wealth creation for the countries, if you call that as Bharatiyata in today's terms, let me create wealth not for myself but for my country.
No,
That's
a lot
where
of
we are
it stems
heading.
from there.
Yes.
When I start thinking of my country first, a lot of things then start falling into place from that particular emotion. Not just creating wealth, everything. Creating a society, creating civil, bringing back our old methods, ancient knowledge systems, a lot of it. Because today, sadly but truly, a lot of my peers, parents, and otherwise some elder also, their thing is padho aur niklo. Teach my kids, send them abroad. And then they stay there. So if this is what our orientation is going to be at every level, that I want to get out of this country, then who's going to stay back? And that's where, Balu sir, I'm really asking you, do we really have a concept of nationhood? Can all of us stand here and if I ask individually, define Bharat? Do we have the same definition? Do we have a similar definition? Do we have a concept of what is Bharat and who am I as Bharatiya? If I am diffused there, if I'm confused there, how is the rest going to flow as a story for my country?
I don't know how people would define it. How would I define it?
Yeah, and I'm saying, does the Prime Minister have clarity there? Because he's given directions as to which way you want to go, how I want you to think.
I've not had the opportunity of conversing with him on this, so I can't answer for him, but I can tell you how I see it. I think a deep inbuilt desire for excellence in everything that we do. To me, that is a true representation of Bharatiyata. Unfortunately, we are all tolerant of mediocrity to such an extent that we have forgotten that real excellence, whether it's nation building, whether it's running a company, whether it is anything else, is desired to be excellent in everything that we do. It's not perfection, right? Perfection maybe
Excellence,
excellence. That's how I look at it. And I just want to answer from an anecdote that I can share. The desire for excellence comes from a deep sense of ownership. And we were presenting to the Prime Minister about how we are trying to make the Indian Railways citizen-centric, and a huge exercise that railways are all without noise. The outside world doesn't even know this. We call it the Rail Karma Yogi program, and we're presenting, and I thought, because I had designed the program, I was like, it's like my baby and I have to be strong and passionate about it. The whole discussion ended, we gave him numbers, and I do a lot of evaluation work, so I gave him all that, how we are associating our work to the actual results, and showed the delta and all that. He heard for the whole 20 minutes of the conversation, then asked me simplistically just 2 questions. He said, your work, we are done for 5 different levels of people who interact with citizens and making them citizen-centric. He just picked 2 from that. And he said, you worked with freight clerks, you worked with railway ticketing clerks. 2 more or less same kind of roles. He said, if a ticketing clerk, after your training, suddenly wakes up one night and says, last month, my Bharatiya Rail, Mera Bharatiya Rail, that's the word he used. In my counter, I actually accounted and submitted accounts of 7 lakh rupees of railway transactions. This month it is 6.2. What happened to the 80,000? Why didn't people travel in my rail? What is going wrong? How do I make it right? If a freight clerk believes that last month I processed 20 tons of freight when I was on my duty, and today it is 18 tons.
Kam kaise ho gaya? How is it?
And he loses sleep over it and believes it, then he says, Bharatiya Rail, Mera Rail ban sakta hai. To me, that's also Bharatiyata, right? And he said it so simplistically, and he said, if you have achieved that, then I'll call your program a success. Till then, go back to the drawing book, start again, he said.
No, very well said, and that's the mark of a leader, but it can be frustrating, can't it be? Look at Swachh Bharat. The world talks about us, we've tried to make 11 crore toilets, we've got certification that we are ODF free, but how many of us, frankly, have ingrained it as a habit? How many of us have not thrown a wrapper when thinking nobody's looking, it doesn't matter? How many of us have not stopped our kids or anybody else? So, till the time we are not doing that, the captain is only as good as the team. So, are we a good team?
No, you asked the question of when are we getting there, or how close are we to our destiny. I'd say we're 90% there. But I will also qualify that with the story of Deng Xiaoping, since I respect Deng Xiaoping. He's one of the only human beings who has moved 700 million people from farm to non-farm employment, which is a really important accomplishment. But Deng Xiaoping goes to a construction site, and the construction manager says, "Sir, my project is 90% complete." So he says, "Congratulations, only 50% of the work is left." The last 10% is 50% of the work.
That's the last mile. That's the toughest.
And we have 50% of the work left, but we are 90% there.
How would you define Bharat? How would you want, when somebody asks you, tell me about your country, what would you say? Oh, you're from Bharat. What's so big about? What's the big deal about? Everybody is talking about Bharat. Everybody knows about India. What's so special about your country? How would I say it? What should I say?
In Hindi, there is a proverb, Gagar mein sagar.
Gagar
In the sense,
mein sagar.
you want me to fit the whole ocean inside a pot. And that's Bharat for me. It is so diverse, it's so expansive, it's so inexplainable. But if you want to explain the whole thing in Bharat as one word or one sentence definition, what would that be? I think I would like to see a Bharat where each lives for the other. That is the Bharat that I am dreaming of, and I'm trying to create through our efforts. Where we are all putting others before ourselves and trying to do something good for the nation together. When John F. Kennedy says that, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I think that is the question we all Indians have to ask today. And if we ask and find an answer for the question for ourselves, I think we are beginning to become Bharatiyas there.
My final question, we got to wind up. I'm just going to ask all of you. This Mark Twain that you brought up, we are born twice. First when we are born, and the next time we know why we are born. How do I know? Everybody's going to ask me the same question, right? Your own question. Tell me, how do I find out why am I born? What's my purpose?
If you are troubled by child's malnutrition in Mozambique or Ethiopia and you lose sleep on it and say, how can a child in this world be hungry? And you want to find a solution, actually do something about it, not just feel. I think the day you discover what Vivekananda says, the 3H, you have your heart to feel, you have the head to think what you can do about it, and the hands to go out and do it, then I think your second life has started.
Fantastic, fantastic. Sadhguru.
Now, this question is often asked by a lot of young and old people also. How do I know that I'm doing my purpose at this point in time in my life? Whether I'm a businessman or a teacher or a whatever, doctor. See, one thing that happens when you are actually living your purpose is there is absolute harmony of your thought, word and deed, which is what he said about head, hand and heart. Whatever you think, that is what you're saying. Whatever you're saying, that is what you're doing. This is a clear indication that you're in line with your purpose. Now, you can be Hitler also, doing your purpose with thought, word and deed, totally aligned that I want to conquer the world and rule it. He's still doing his purpose because that is the purpose for which he was born. Correct. So this alignment, what you call Trikarna Shuddhi, happens to those who are in alignment with their purpose, and the resultant outcome is the joy that you feel all the time. It may not be your ultimate purpose, which is moksha as per our scripture. But even this day, what you did today is edging you towards your ultimate purpose of moksha if your thought, word and actions are in alignment and you feel the joy and effortlessness in all your deeds. That's where you know that you are doing your purpose. So be happy today, that's the whole purpose.
So well said. That joy is a very important factor.
No, that question is above my pay grade. You got two good answers and we're out of time.
I can only say this. You do what you love and love what you do. For me, my passion is my profession, ladies and gentlemen, and I love every moment of it. Imagine I've read such a wonderful book, sitting in front of a fantastic audience and talking to such great minds. What best could I ask for? So that's how it is. That's my purpose. Thank you so much. Thank you.